Hello everyone, Smoke here. Today, I bring you a build which I like to call the Eldritch Assassin. The goal of this build is rather simple, maximizing the number of actions we can take in a turn, achieving a grand total of 6. And, since in Honor mode, extra actions only award us with 1 attack, the best way to capitalize on all of those actions is to use Eldritch Blast. If you are intimidated by heavily multi-class builds, then this build is definitely not for you, as we will be taking levels in 4 classes, with the final split being 2 levels in Warlock, 3 levels in Rogue, 5 levels in Sorcerer, and 2 levels in Fighter. Despite this, however, this build actually comes online rather quickly, and can be played throughout the game, rather than just being something that you respec into once you hit level 12. This character also specs heavily in Charisma, and gains many skill proficiencies, making it an incredible face for your party. With that said, let's go into the build. For your origin, any of them work well, except for the Dark Urge, as a very important item can be easily missed if we play that origin. The big standout is Astarion, since his happy buff can help us land our attacks, but it's more nice to have than a necessity. If you want to build a custom character, any race works well, as the main features of the build will be unlocked by our classes. However, some standouts are Dwerger, since they can cast invisibility at will, starting at level 5. Zariel Tiefling for the Thaumaturgy cantrip, granting us advantage and intimidation checks and making dialogue even easier. Halfling for their racial feature Halfling Luck, rerolling all ones throughout the adventure, and Human and Half-Elf for their shield proficiency. We will unlock that through our classes, but it's gonna be rather late, so this makes us a little bit tankier. This character can also utilize the Darkness spell rather well, so Drow and Half-Drow are also solid candidates, since they can use the Darkness spell once per long rest, starting at level 5. That said, play whichever race suits your roleplay preferences. Now, onto our starting class. This is actually not nearly as straightforward as most other builds, since we have 4 classes to choose from, and choosing any of them changes the build somewhat. I will go over their pros and cons now. Starting with Warlock, they gain proficiency with light armor and simple weapons, none of which will be terribly useful for us. It also grants us proficiency in wisdom saving throws, making mind-altering effects less likely to land on us. In addition to that, it gives us our main action, Eldritch Blast, at level 1, allowing us to do what we want from the very beginning of the game, and building up from there. Sorcerer and Fighter each give us Constitution saving throws, which let us concentrate on spells more effectively. Between these two, Fighter is my preferred choice, since it also gives us shield and armor proficiencies, which really help in the early game. Although Sorcerer lets us have magic missile and shield from the get-go. Choosing either of these, however, would delay the playstyle of using Eldritch Blast as an assassin, and would be better for a later respec. Lastly, we have Rogue. This gives us proficiency in both dexterity and intelligence saving throw, which in my view are worse than either wisdom or constitution. What this does give us, however, is a lot of skill proficiencies and expertise, as well as a very smooth leveling path. Since this is a face character, I value the extra skills quite highly, and this is what I'll be using. That said, all of the other options are viable and have their pros and cons, and there is no wrong choice here. For the background, pick whichever one suits your roleplay preference. Because we'll be gaining so many skill points from Rogue, we are very flexible in this regard. For our attributes, we want 16 points in Dexterity, 14 points in Constitution, 10 in Wisdom, and 17 in Charisma, since we'll be using the Hag's Hair to even that one out. If this is not the character that you plan to use the hair on, feel free to reallocate that point from Charisma to Wisdom to improve our saving throws. For our skills, I favor Persuasion and Deception, but you can choose what you want. With that out of the way, make your character pretty by hitting the randomize button 7 times, and let's go to our level progression. At level 2 and 3, we level up in Rogue and pick the Assassin subclass. This gives us a refund on our action whenever we attack from outside of combat, and guarantees critical hits on surprised enemies. It also gives us advantage on attack rolls against enemies that haven't taken a turn yet, which is incredibly powerful. Once we hit level 4, we multiclass into Warlock. The subclass we pick is the Great Old One, letting us frighten enemies whenever we land a critical hit. For our spells, the really important one here is Hacks, as it gives each of our hits an additional d6 of necrotic damage. Your other pick is personal preference. Despite already being a Warlock, for now we will still play mostly as a Rogue, in addition to adding Hacks to our target for some added damage. As such, our gear reflects that, and we're still mostly an Archer. I'll showcase now how our level 4 build plays like, but for a full guide on how to play this Assassin playstyle, please check my other Assassin guide, linked in the description and in one of the cards on your screen. Level 5 is a big level for us. Despite having split levels in our classes, cantrip damage scales up at character level 5, rather than our class level. Eldritch Blast is different from other cantrips, since rather than gaining larger damage die, we gain an additional beam. We're gonna take our second level in Warlock. Our spell choice here is not hugely important, so pick what you want. What is important though is the Eldritch invocations that we get. The most important one being Agonizing Blast, adding our spellcasting bonus to the damage of our Eldritch Blasts. That damage applies for each beam, so it's effectively doubled, going from +3 to +6, or +4 to +8, when we get our Charisma to 18 with the Hag's Hair. For our second invocation, we have 2 powerful options. The first one is to take Devil's Sight, giving us immunity to the blindness caused by magical darkness. The second one is Repelling Blast, which makes Eldritch Blast knock enemies back, being especially useful with surface and cloud spells like Spike Growth, Cloud of Daggers, or Hunger of Hadar from your other party members. Now, let's talk gear. Until level 5, we'll play essentially as an archer, so our gear reflects that. We'll be using the Gloves of Archery to gain proficiency with longbows and get an additional 2 points of damage with our bow attacks. For our melee weapon slot, we equip the Club of Hill Giant Strength to set our strength score to 19 and pair that with the Titan String Bow, which increases our damage rolls with both our dexterity and strength scores. Our amulet of choice is the Broodmother's Revenge to add a d6 to our bow damage. The Caustic Bannerang increases our weapon damage by another 2 points. Lastly, the Ring of Protection gives us some added defense. Once we hit level 5, our Eldritch Blast will become our main form of attack, so we can move our archer gear to a character that needs it more. As for our new gear, we'll start by equipping the Gloves of Dexterity, gotten from the Crash vendor. It sets our dexterity score to 18 and increases our attack rolls by 1, both of which benefit our build. The Boots of Stormy Clamor, gotten from the Myconid colony, make our Eldritch Blast inflict reverberation with each hit. Because of how often we'll be hitting our targets, this is great to both knock enemies prone for our martial allies, and to strip legendary resistance from certain enemies in honor mode. Last but not least, the Knife of the Undermountain King, gotten from the Crash vendor, makes us more likely to land critical hits after the first turn of combat. One more thing, before moving on to Act 2, is that you should always keep your eyes peeled for the Elixir of Bloodlust. When we drink it, Until our next long rest, whenever we kill an enemy, we gain an extra action for another Eldritch Blast, once per turn. This elixir dramatically increases the power of our character, although it is rather rare, so use it on days when you face difficult combats, and when you do use it, try to make that day last.
Nothing will stand in my way.
Need to stay focused. Got to move.
Still breathing, despite everything.
Victory awaits. You bow, or you break.
What now? Mistra Rill.
In Act 2, we unlock more important pieces of gear. For our amulet, the Spine Shudder amulet, gotten from the Mimic atop of the Moonrise Towers. It adds 2 stacks of reverberation to a target whenever we hit them with a ranged spell attack. This stacks with the Boots of Stormy Clamor and lets us spread reverberation extremely quickly. Our best in slot chest piece is the Potent Robe, which is gotten from Ophira, after rescuing the Tieflings from Moonrise Towers. At the beginning of our turn, we gain temporary hit points equal to our Charisma modifier. More importantly, it adds our Charisma modifier to our cantrip damage, just like Agonizing Blast, and that bonus is added to each of our beams. Despite getting guaranteed critical hits on surprised enemies, some fights just go longer than one turn, or are just impossible to trigger a surprise round in. For that, we can carry items that increase our critical hit chance, such as the Knife of the Undermountain King, gotten from the Crash Vendor, as well as the Covert Cowl, gotten from the Cellar at Last Light Inn. Last but not least, the Darkfire Shortbow sold by Demon in the Last Light Inn lets us cast Haste once per long rest. I recommend pre-buffing with this before any dangerous fights. All of these items can be acquired quite early in Act 2, when your party is at around level 5 or 6 without any difficult fights. Now, let's see how we level up for the rest of Act 2. There are basically 2 paths we can take, either multiclassing into Sorcerer or multiclassing into Fighter. Multiclassing into Fighter gives us shield proficiency and the defense fighting style, for a total of 3 extra armor class at level 6. And at level 7 we gain Action Surge, for yet another Eldritch Blast. The downside is that it's a bit of a dead end, since we're only planning on taking 2 levels of Fighter, and that would delay our feat even more. Our other option is multiclassing into Sorcerer. Sorcerer gives us access to a couple of very interesting features. At first level of Sorcerer, we can pick up the Shield Spell and Magic Missile, or when we need to have a guaranteed kill. At Sorcerer level 2, we can pick the Twin Cast and Distant Meta Magics. Our spell here does not matter too much, so pick what you like. Finally, at character level 8 and sorcerer level 3, we pick up the Quickened Meta Magic, letting us use our bonus action to cast a spell or cantrip. For your spells, I recommend Darkness if you picked up Devil's Sight with your Warlock. If not, then Misty Step and Cloud of Daggers are good options. Though, keep in mind that Cloud of Daggers is gonna be mostly a backup since we're gonna be spending most of our actions with Eldritch Blast. At level 9, we pick our only feat for this build, an ability score improvement to bring our charisma up and increase our accuracy and damage. Level 10. This is usually the point in which I'm starting Act 3. We can finally learn level 3 spells, and the one we take here is Haste, giving us an extra action for 10 turns. We can also twin cast this to give another one of our party members an extra action, although beware that if you lose concentration, both characters become lethargic and lose their action for the turn. At level 11, we multiclass for the last time into Fighter, picking the defense combat style. This is the only point in the build when I absolutely recommend a respec, since all spells from items, such as scrolls, use the casting modifier of the last class we picked. With our respec, we want our last pick class to be either Sorcerer or Warlock. Since now we can concentrate on Haste, and losing concentration on it is so devastating, I recommend starting with a level in Sorcerer to increase our odds of maintaining concentration. At level 12, we take our second level in Fighter, with Action Surge, or yet another action we can use at the start of combat. For our Act 3 gear, there are two important pieces. The first are the Spellmight Gloves, pickpocketed from Lucretius at the circus in Rivington. They give us the Spellmight passive, which reduce our attack rolls by 5, but add an additional 1d8 to our damage roll with spells. This bonus does get doubled on a critical hit, increasing the damage of our Eldritch Blast significantly. The other important item here is Rhapsody, gotten from Khazadar at the end of Astarion's questline. This dagger increases our attack rolls, damage, and spell DC by 1 for each foe that we slay, up to a maximum of 3. For a bow slot, there are two bows that work really well as stat sticks. The Deadshot Bow, which increases our critical range, and the Hellrider Longbow, which increases our initiative. Pick whichever one is not being used by your archer party member. Now, for a couple of tips when playing this build. In the early game, your bow sneak attack will do more damage than Eldritch Blast, so open with bow sneak attacks, and then follow up with Eldritch Blasts. Two, we don't actually cast that many spells, so you should spend most of your spell slots on sorcery points to fuel our quickened meta magic. Always try to have a multiple of 3 to either twin cast haste or quicken Eldritch Blast without having to convert mid-combat. 3. Try to start combat with shovel. For a more detailed explanation on how to guarantee surprise rounds in combat, watch my Assassin guide. That will be all for today. If this video was helpful to you, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Also, if you have any tips in playing this playstyle that I didn't cover in this guide, please comment down below.
Yeah!